Jim Carrey stood in the wings of HBO's Real Time with Bill Maher. His trademark smile absent, replaced by a quiet intensity in his eyes as Bill Maher's voice echoed through the studio. And our next guest, Maher smirked, has gone. From comedy legend to political cartoonist to whatever he is these days. As Carrey walked out to mixed applause, the tension was already thick moments earlier. His team had received a misdirected email revealing Maher had spent 10 minutes backstage mocking Carrey's spiritual beliefs and political artwork, calling him just another Hollywood burnout. Maher extended his hand with a grin, but Carrey's expression didn't change. This wasn't the slapstick star from Ace Ventura. This was a man with something serious to say. "Bill," Carrey said calmly, his voice reaching every corner of the silent studio. "Before we start, there's something we need to address." Maher's smile wavered and the audience leaned in. Realizing this wasn't going to be a lighthearted reunion, it was about to be the confrontation of the year. While Maher, known for his provocative commentary and smug intellect, expected another victory lap at 68, Carrey, now 62, had evolved from Hollywood's most bankable comic into a reflective artist unafraid to challenge fame, politics, and himself. To some, he was an enigma. To others, a cautionary tale, but tonight he was something else entirely, a man ready to speak his truth. What viewers didn't know was that this confrontation had been quietly brewing for months. Behind his desk, Bill Maher had repeatedly used Jim Carrey as a punchline, mocking his spiritual awakening as just another celebrity midlife crisis, dismissing his political art as the finger paintings of a bored millionaire, and most cutting of all, belittling Carrey's openness about depression as attention-seeking behavior from someone who couldn't stand being out of the spotlight. Backstage, Carrey had reviewed a compilation prepared by his team, a devastating montage of Maher's most contemptuous remarks from the past year. The same production assistant who had mistakenly sent Maher's pre-show insults to Carrey's team had also included links to 3 other segments where Maher had ruthlessly mocked Carrey's evolution beyond comedy. The stakes were clear. For Maher, this was about preserving his image as the untouchable king of political satire, the guy who could say anything to anyone. But for Carrey, it was about something deeper. The right to grow beyond the role the public had boxed him into and to confront the culture of cynicism Maher had come to embody. "We've known each other for what, 30 years? Maher began, trying to set a nostalgic tone. "That's right. Be long enough that I thought we had mutual respect," Carrey replied, his normally expressive face unnervingly still. "But I've been hearing things that suggest otherwise." The audience shifted uneasily. This wasn't the segment they were expecting. Maher's eyes briefly darted to his producers off camera. Something had clearly gone wrong with his carefully planned show. "I'm not sure what you're referring to," Maher said with a forced chuckle. "We're comedians, right? Make fun of everyone and each other?" Carrey nodded slowly. "That's true. Comedy matters have built my life on it. But there's a difference between comedy and contempt, Bill." Leaning forward, he added, "Your producer accidentally sent me the prep notes for tonight's show along with some other interesting clips." The color drained from Maher's face as murmurs rippled through the audience. Nearby, a production assistant buried her face in her hands. "I think you know what I'm talking about," Carrey continued, his calm voice gaining quiet intensity. "You've spent a lot of time talking about me when I wasn't there to respond. You've called my spiritual journey New Age nonsense, mocked my art as the tantrums of a has-been, and suggested that my openness about mental health is just, what did you call it? Attention-seeking behavior?" Maher shifted uncomfortably in his seat, the unflappable host suddenly on the defensive. "Look, Jim, it's a comedy show. We exaggerate for effect. You, of all people, should understand." "That," Carrey gave a slight nod. "I understand comedy better than most, Bill. I also understand bullying when I see it." Maher quickly signaled for a commercial break, hoping to regain control, but Carrey wasn't done. "No," he said firmly, locking eyes with the host. "Let's not cut away just yet." He turned to the camera, his gaze steady. "Your audience deserves to hear both sides, don't they, Bill? Isn't that what you always say, honest conversation?" The tension in the studio was electric. The audience, unsure at first whose side to take, began to murmur in support of Carrey's raw sincerity. Sensing the energy shift, Maher changed tactics. "You're right, Jim, let's talk," he said, folding his hands on the desk. "But let me just say, you seem very sensitive for someone who made a career mocking others. Your whole brand was built on making faces and literally talking out of your ass in Ace Ventura." He paused, waiting for laughs that never came. "And now you want to be taken seriously? As some kind of spiritual guru? Come on," Carrey's eyes flashed. "That's rich coming from you, Bill. You started out doing stand-up and dick jokes. Now you sit there like some political philosopher. The difference is I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm openly searching. I'm evolving. Can you say the same?" The crowd erupted into spontaneous applause, startling Maher, who was unaccustomed to losing control of the room. A young woman in the front row stood up clapping until security gently guided her back to her seat. Offstage, Maher's producer frantically signaled to cut to commercial, slicing her finger across her throat. But Carrey wasn't done. Reaching into his jacket, he pulled out a tablet. "Before we take that break your producer is so desperate for her," he said. "I think your audience deserves to see this." He gestured to the crew. "Roll the clip, please." The studio screen flickered to life. Maher's own voice filled the room. Jim Carrey needs to decide if he's a comedian, a painter, a Buddhist, or whatever the hell he's calling himself these days. It's pathetic watching him beg for relevance. At least when he was talking out of his ass, he was honest about being full of it. A collective gasp swept through the audience. Carrey had come prepared with receipts. As the clip ended, the room sat in stunned silence. Maher's face drained of its usual smugness, replaced with something unfamiliar. Genuine embarrassment. "That was from your show 4 months ago," Carrey said quietly. "There's more, but I think that makes my point." Maher, a seasoned pro, tried to recover. "Look, Jim, I stand by what I said. Public figures are fair game. Can't put your life out there and expect applause. That's not how it works." Carrey nodded. "Right, criticism comes with the spotlight. But there's a difference between criticism and cruelty, between commentary and contempt." His voice grew stronger, resonant. "And here's what I really came to say tonight. Bill, something your audience needs to hear." The studio was completely silent now, every eye locked on him. "For years you've built your brand on being the truth teller, the guy who says what others won't. But somewhere along the line, you confused cynicism with clarity. You mistook mockery for insight." Carrey rose from his seat, commanding the stage in a way that reminded everyone why he was a star. "You mock my spiritual journey like searching for meaning is something to be ashamed of. You ridicule my art as if trying something new is weakness instead of growth." He turned back to the audience. "I've made mistakes in my career. I've played characters that couldn't be made today," Carrey said, his voice steady. "And I've said things I regret. The difference is I'm willing to evolve, to learn, to grow. When was the last time you admitted you were wrong about anything, Bill?" The audience erupted, many rising to their feet in applause as Maher sat frozen, his carefully crafted persona visibly unraveling. But Carrey wasn't attacking, his tone softened. "This isn't about revenge. It's about honesty, the kind of honesty you claim to stand for." He turned to face Maher directly. "You've spent years telling your audience that people like me are the problem. Celebrities with opinions. Artists who dare to grow beyond what made them famous. But maybe, just maybe, the real problem is the culture of contempt you've helped create. A culture where growth is mocked and compassion is seen as weakness." Then, in a moment no one expected, Carrey smiled, that same bright, iconic smile that had lit up movie screens for decades, and extended his hand to Maher. "The good news is, it's never too late to change. Not for you, Bill. Not even for me." The studio burst into applause again, louder than before. Maher, recognizing the gravity of what was unfolding live on his own show, slowly rose and shook Carrey's hand, his expression unreadable, part humiliation, part reluctant respect. "Well," he finally said, voice subdued, "I guess we can skip the prepared questions about your new book." A ripple of laughter broke the tension, but the weight of the moment lingered. Within minutes of the broadcast ending, clips of the confrontation flooded social media. Carrey versus Maher began trending worldwide, followed quickly by hashtags like hashtag sheer respect and hashtag authenticity wins. Its exchange struck a chord far beyond Maher's usual audience. The official HBO YouTube clip hit 1 million views in its first hour. Bootleg versions spread across TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, boosted by algorithms eager to feed users something raw and real. Younger audiences who mostly knew Carrey from memes now saw him in a new light, as a voice of emotional courage. In an era of performative outrage, news outlets rushed to respond. Some dubbed it the most honest moment in late-night history. Lines ranged from Jim Carrey School's Bill Maher on authenticity to how Carrey's spiritual evolution led to the Maher Showdown. The New York Times published a feature titled, "When Comedy Gets Personal, the Carrey Maher Moment." The segment quickly became the most treated article of the week, even earning praise from conservative outlets that usually criticized both men. Morning shows replayed the clip with hosts analyzing every second. "Did you see Maher's face when Carrey pulled out the tablet?" joked a Good Morning America host. On The View, the co-hosts were unusually united. "Whatever you think of Jim Carrey's spiritual journey, his courage in that moment was undeniable," said Whoopi Goldberg. Too loud applause. Celebrity reactions poured in. Ben Affleck tweeted, "Been waiting years for someone to say this to Bill's face, bravo." Robert Downey Jr. added, "What Jim did took real courage." Even Jon Stewart weighed in when authentic confrontation replaces performative outrage, real conversation becomes possible. Within 24 hours, the clip had over 50 million views across platforms. Analysts praised Carrey for confronting Maher without becoming bitter or combative, challenging contempt without embodying it. Podcasts from Joe Rogan to Brené Brown dissected the moment as a blueprint for better public discourse. Though HBO initially panicked, they soon realized they had a ratings phenomenon. The network quickly greenlit a documentary, Unmasked, When Comics Get Real, featuring interviews with comedians on moments when persona gave way to truth. Carrey declined to participate, simply telling his agent, "The moment speaks for itself. I have nothing to add." For Maher, the fallout was complicated. His ratings soared, everyone wanted to see what he'd say next, but his public image took a serious hit. For the first time in years, critics began questioning whether his sharp wit had slid into lazy cynicism. A viral compilation of his most mean-spirited moments racked up 12 million views in 3 days. Longtime fans started to wonder if they had mistaken bullying for bravery. 3 days after the confrontation, Maher addressed it on Twitter, "Good TV sometimes means getting your ass handed to you." Still processing what happened with Jim Carrey, more thoughts on Friday's show. It wasn't an apology, but for Maher, even acknowledging defeat was rare. The tweet drew over 200,000 likes and 50,000 replies, many urging him to reflect deeper. Behind the scenes, HBO held emergency meetings with his production team. According to Variety, execs weren't asking him to change his politics, but to rethink his tone. "The days of mocking people for cheap laughs may be ending," one insider said. The conversation had moved far beyond just Carrey and Maher. Cultural critics began examining the line between comedy and cruelty. The Atlantic published a widely shared essay titled "The End of Snark: Jim Carrey and the Case for Compassionate Commentary," arguing that audiences now craved authenticity over edgy detachment. Communication professors at Yale and other universities began using the confrontation in media ethics courses, citing it as a turning point in how we view public discourse. 5 years ago, Maher's mockery would have gone unchallenged. One professor told the Yale Daily News, "Today, there's a growing hunger for sincerity that crosses political lines." Most strikingly, clips of Carrey's line, "That's not criticism, it's contempt," became a viral shorthand for calling out toxic commentary online. Mental health advocates also praised Carrey's defense of emotional honesty. National Alliance on Mental Illness reported a 40% increase in men seeking information on depression resources in the week following the broadcast. When someone like Jim Carrey defends vulnerability as strength, it gives men permission to open up, the organization's director said. A week later, Carrey posted a new painting on social media, a gentle portrait of Maher standing at a Fork in the road, one path marked contempt, the other curiosity. The caption read simply, "We all face this choice daily, including me." Jim Carrey's post received over 3 million likes and was shared by celebrities like Oprah Winfrey and Russell Brand, each offering their own reflections on choosing openness over cynicism. Carrey's memoirs and misinformation, shot. 2, #1 on Amazon, and quickly sold out nationwide. Publishers rushed to offer him follow-up deals, but his team announced he would be taking a 6-month retreat to focus on art and spiritual practice. Jim said what he needed to say, his publicist told Entertainment Weekly. Now he's letting the moment breathe without trying to monetize it. The following Friday, Maher opened his show with something no one expected: humility. With record-breaking ratings, millions tuned in to see his response. "Last week, something unusual happened on this stage," he began, his usual swagger toned down. "Got called out by someone I've frankly been unfair to. Like it's easy to mock what we don't understand. Harder to admit when we've done that." He paused, clearly wrestling with the vulnerability. "I've built a career on calling out hypocrisy. But there's a difference between holding people accountable and tearing them down because their growth doesn't look like ours." The audience sat in stunned silence, and he continued. "To Jim Carrey, say this: you've given me something to think about, and maybe that's worth more than an easy laugh." In a world full of shouting, sometimes the quiet voice has the most to say. This time, the applause was real, sustained, unprompted, and deeply felt. For perhaps the first time, Maher had allowed himself to be genuinely vulnerable on his own stage. Twitter lit up, many longtime critics expressing newfound respect. Industry insiders noted a subtle shift in Maher's tone in the episodes that followed. While still sharp, his commentary began focusing more on ideas than personal attacks. Ratings remained strong, suggesting audiences welcomed the change. The Carrey-Maher moment sparked a cultural ripple effect. Even late-night hosts like Stephen Colbert and Jimmy Kimmel publicly reflected on their own reliance on mockery for easy laughs. Proof that something deeper had been awakened in the world of comedy. "Maybe we've all gotten a little lazy," Stephen Colbert admitted on his show. "Finding the humanity in people we disagree with, that's the harder work of comedy." Hollywood executives, always quick to spot a trend, began greenlighting projects exploring authenticity versus performance. Netflix announced a new docuseries, Beyond the Mask: Comedians on Life, Growth, and Change, featuring interviews with performers who had undergone personal evolution. At Stanford, researchers from the Media Psychology Lab conducted a study on audience reactions to the Carrey-Maher confrontation and found that, regardless of political views, viewers rated Carrey's approach as more persuasive and admirable than traditional confrontation. Authentic emotion may be replacing performative outrage as the currency of public discourse, the lead researcher noted. Whether this moment would spark lasting change in media remained uncertain. Critics pointed out that mockery and cynicism still had a strong grip on audiences, especially in a polarized climate. "One moment of honesty doesn't transform an entire media ecosystem," wrote a Columbia Journalism Review analyst. "But it creates a reference point for what's possible." And for one night, that possibility broke through. Authentic confrontation pierced the carefully curated masks of public life, reminding millions that real connection was still possible. In comedy clubs across the country, performers began noticing audiences responding more to vulnerability than to attacks, a subtle but telling shift in what people found entertaining. As clips from the moment continued to circulate months later, one quote from Carrey remained especially resonant: "The real courage isn't in mocking others from a safe distance, it's in allowing yourself to grow, even when that growth invites ridicule." In a culture starved for authenticity, that message struck a chord, sparking widespread conversation about how both public figures and everyday people might engage with each other more meaningfully. The confrontation was eventually nominated for an Emmy in a newly created category, Outstanding Unscripted Moment in a Variety Series, a category seemingly made for what critics were calling the Carrey moment. Both men were invited to the ceremony, though only Maher attended. On the red carpet, when asked about it, he simply said, "Sometimes the best television happens when things don't go according to plan." Maher later reflected, "Jim taught me something that night and I'm still learning from it." 6 months after their viral confrontation, the two men reunited not on screen, but at a quiet charity event for mental health awareness. Photographers captured them deep in conversation, both smiling genuinely. Neither commented on what was said, but the image spoke volumes. Two comedians known for hiding behind humor, finally meeting as their authentic selves. In a world driven by performance, their moment of real connection reminded millions that growth, humility, and mutual respect are still possible even under the spotlight.